Welcome to our second program of Dr Horta. Thankfully, COVID restrictions have allowed us to come out again. It's been a while, perhaps up to 4 months, and because of the significant rain that Melbourne has had, we're able to continue pursuing Dr Horta dark Greek greens. Today, we will look specifically at two other types that we didn't have an opportunity to do so. One is Tzohi and the other is Tzohi, and I will show you both types. The last program we looked at Bresis. Welcome and join with me. Bouzoni, as we said, is this particular type of wild green. As you can see, it's sprouting here, which means that its season is nearly over, but due to the rains and the moisture in the soil, we still have a number of them. These can get fairly woody, and sometimes they can get a fairly hairy on the side or on top. That just means that the time is over. They are excellent food with olive oil, but they can be fairly heavy, so I wouldn't concentrate a lot of them in the one pot. I would mix them with others, and I'll give you an example of two others that we're after today. The one that you see in front of you where my knife is pointing is what you call a classic Tzohi. As we said from the last program, we always turn them over and we remove all the bits that are older, as you can see, and you can tell from the discoloration. Now, this time of year we should expect that. We then cut off any excess. We cut it in half, which allow it to boil. So this is what we call a classic Tzohi, and as you can see, it's sprouted. Traditionally, they grow out fairly flat. Here is another example of a Bouzoni. As you can see, this means that it's sprouting. It's sprouting. We turn it over. It's a fairly woody, but once we remove most of it and we start breaking it up, you can see that there are pieces that you can throw in the pot. These are still fairly good, but time has caught up given that it's October, but there's still been enough rain to allow it to become a full-grown mature Bouzoni, which is fairly edible and very tasty. But if you come over here, I'll give you an example when my finger is pointing. So this is a Tzohi, so not an Tzohi, but a Tzohi. Around this time, most plants sprout. That is a sprouting plant. You can eat that. You can eat that. So we're picking the sprouting areas. Here's a really good example. Sprouting. Sprouting. These will be fantastic in the pot. Sprouting. And so forth. So don't think just because the season is fully over. If there's enough water and they sprout, we should pick these. They should be picked and used. And if you're not sure, run your hands through, and if you feel any sense of prickling, you just remove the more prickly types and the rest can go in the pot. And there's not much washing involved in these. Here is another example of a sprouting Tzohi. You can see the heads here. These are all edible. We click them off and you might be able to hear the noise that they just clip off, which means they're fairly fresh. So if you ever see a plant like this and it's looking fairly healthy, don't worry too much about the buds or the flowers. You just pull them off and the rest of it is fairly edible. This is an Tzohi, a wild Tzohi. When you pull the leaves back, the sprouted bits come out. That's what we're going to use. Not the big leaves. The leaves, we pull those out, we pick these up. We pull those out, we pick these up. We are finished for the day, and that has resulted in being able to get Agriotzoha and Tzohi, which we're taking back home now to boil in a dish that many people aren't aware of. It's called Dr Yahni. It's a Laconian dish that's very traditional, that some of you may be aware, but others have not seen it before. So join us when we go and put these great greens on the plate. Welcome back. We're at the cooking stage now. We have washed and cleaned our Agriotzoha and our Tzohi. We've washed them at least twice. Given that these are not predisposed, unlike bresses that we saw in the first program, to have a lot of mud, it was much quicker and it was much easier. So these are ready to go. So today we're going to put together a unique dish that is fairly common in many parts of southern Greece, particularly in Laconia, where I'm from, in Sparta if you like, the region of Sparta, where greens become yahni, a dish called yahni. Yahni is a Persian word that refers to stew, particularly in meat. However, in Greek cooking, and in particularly in certain regional areas like Laconia, we have what we call Yahni Horta, which is stewed wild greens, and that's what we'll be making today. The ingredients are very basic. They involve olive oil, homemade tomato paste that we've made here, some concentrate tomato paste to give it greater pungency, and to begin the process we'll have some onions and tomato which we'll put in with the olive oil. The olive oil, as we mentioned in the first program, is from the village of Vrodama, my mother's village, where we're able to, it's a olive growing region, and the olive oil is fairly high quality. Let's begin the process of cooking. So we take the olive oil, we've lit the pot, so to heat up the olive oil, we put a fair bit. Don't be afraid of using olive oil. It's medicinal in every respect. So we'll just leave that for a minute or so until it starts to sizzle a bit and heat up. Once it does that, we'll be able to put in the onions, garlic and tomato. The next step is to get a bit of concentrate belde, or concentrate paste. We place it in there. Not a great deal at the moment, and we'll stir it a bit to mix it around. I remember my mother making this fairly regularly. Particularly, she was fortunate enough to have the Tzohi and the Agriotzoha. As you can see now, it's mixed in, and we'll leave it for a minute more so it heats up a bit more, and then we'll add the Agriotzoha, the wild green Greek greens. As you can see, it's cooking fairly well now. The fire is still a bit high, but that doesn't matter, so we'll lower the fire now since it's heated up significantly. Put it to about half, and now what we'll do, we'll begin to add the Tzohi, which is a combination, as we said, of Tzohi and Agriotzoha, wild Tzohi as well. So we'll place them in there. Now these will have some water, some moisture will come out. We don't necessarily need to add any further water. So we place them in there. We don't need to turn them at the moment, we just leave them in there. The next thing is we add the tomato sauce, which is homemade, and we tip it just on top, and that should be enough water to allow it to create a level of moisture so it doesn't burn down the bottom. I'm just pushing them down a bit so they can soak up some of the olive oil and the onions. We'll be stirring them and turning them over later, but for the moment we'll just leave them there. We've also put some aluminium foil on top, and this will help the steaming process and the cooking process to make it a bit quicker, but also to get through the thickness of some of the greens that are here. So there's the aluminium foil. That's my technique, not my mother's. We're putting the lid on top. That's secure, so there's steam staying in. And to secure it and to make sure that it's actually greater pressure, we've put that on top, which is fairly heavy. So in time, we should give it about an hour, depending how much you want it crunchy or al dente or soft. It's usually about an hour, so we'll come back and visit it halfway through, and then we'll add salt and pepper and take it from there. Thank you for the coffee and welcome back. In between the food being prepared, we thought we'd answer some questions and give you a couple of updates of where we're heading with our videos on wild Greek greens. So allow me to begin by saying that in 2022 next year, we're intending to start again, pending COVID of course, pending the rains. But what we do want to do is we want to make sure that we can expand and teach others about this humble food that's been passed down for generations. So we hope that if you're interested and you wish to register your interest, my email will be placed on the bottom of the screen. Please send me an email, and we will look forward to next year of taking 3 or 4 people, possibly every second Saturday or Sunday, to teach them a bit about Agrio Horta. The other thing that we would welcome is if there are, thank you firstly for all your likes, but if there are comments, please send us comments. That will help us to better prepare the product that we're doing. We don't always get it right, but with your assistance, we'll be able to hopefully improve. And we hope that we should be able to get about 4 or 5 products next year and give you an indication of the different types of Agrio Horta or wild Greek greens that we haven't been able to integrate into the programs due to COVID. I also wanted to raise with you some questions that have been raised through the comments, and also people have contacted me, and that relates to the juice that's left. Today, for example, there is no juice because we're not boiling them, we're virtually steaming them if you like. But there are different types of Agrio Horta or different types of greens that are suited to drinking the juice. At the first program, we looked at bresses. I deliberately did not raise the issue of drinking the juice because they're much sweeter. So we avoided that. Traditionally, the types of Agrio Horta that the juice is maintained for drinking are what you called wild radicia, Agrio radica, which have red stems, and the reason why they're valuable and they've got the nutritious quality is because they're significantly bitter. So I've deliberately not mentioned those, and I've deliberately not mentioned the drinking of juice from the existing bresses. When we're able to acquire those Agrio radica, wild radica if you like, we will be able to show you how to use the water at the end, whether it's for the garden or for drinking. Very briefly, you put a bit of olive oil in them, a bit of lemon and a bit of salt, and off you go. I also wanted to talk about this food and contextualize it within the 200 years of the beginning of the Greek Revolution of 1821. I raised that because as Greece has evolved, so has its food.
And in 1950, many years after the revolution and the creation of the Greek state in 1830, we basically had a number of cooking books that were coming out. One was by a very famous cook, Mendes, and he was of the view that we should reject many of our past traditional foods and adopt a cuisine based on milk and creams, more of a French type of cuisine. And that was an appealing type of cuisine, particularly for the elites and for well-off Athenians and Greeks. I'm saying the exact opposite today, that our cuisine, which has been tested through time, particularly with these wild Greek greens, should never be rejected. It's a cuisine that has been tested through time and has been acquired by many people throughout Greece. So it's a humble food that we should respect, and we should feel proud of our Hellenic heritage in terms of our cuisine. I should suggest that there is a significant program that's been produced a number of years ago. It's called The Journey of Greek Food. I think it's a 4-part series. I strongly recommend that you take a look at it, and you'll see the variety of foods and the richness where East and West and even South and North merge in the Greek peninsula. The other thing that I did want to add is that in a couple of days' time, there's going to be the 28th of October 1940, which is Greece's second national day. And I deliberately raised that because it was this humble food that people picked in the mountains during one of the wettest and snowiest times in Greece and coldest in 1940, that despite the many thousands of deaths out of malnutrition, was still able to sustain a population, this significantly humble food. So when we have it, and when we collect it, and when we pick it, and when we cook it, I believe we should show it the respect that it deserves, because it literally sustained generations through some of the most difficult and challenging times.
As you can see, after 20 minutes, how much it's dropped. It's dropped significantly. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this olive wooden spoon, turn it upside down, completely turn it upside down, move it a bit, place the foil again, which allows it to steam quicker and faster. And as I said, that's my invention, not my mother's. Replace the lid tight, put this on to it, and increase the fire. Now, ideally, as I recall, the way that you know that this is ready is when the greens wilt significantly and they also soften. That will depend on how much water is there. Sometimes you may need to add some additional water. I can recall that my mum, when she used to make this dish, she would allow for the tomato at times to stick to the base. When it stuck to the base a bit, it was ready. So let's give it another 20 minutes or so, and then we'll come back and see how it is. As you can see, the dish is ready. You'll notice that once the dish, the actual meal is placed in this large bowl, that it will release water. Do not worry about that. It's very normal for these type of greens to maintain and keep water. So what we'll do is we'll put some in the plate. As you can see, the colour is on the reddish side. It will release its own water. We will place some lemon. It's already been salted and peppered. Some olive oil. I put a bit more than normal. Spoon and bread and cheese and olives. It's a bit on the hot side, but it should be okay. So what I've done is I've placed some in this bowl. I've added lemon and I've added olive oil. I've tasted it and it's rather peppery and nice. That's its natural flavour as well. And you'll see that the garlic, the onion is still there, and the tomato. So it'll be fairly rich. And if you don't have it all in one day, you can put it in the fridge. Once it cools down, you can have it one day after the other. That's not going to be a problem. So finishing off, thank you for joining us in this second program. And I just want to finish off with one statement. For Jared Butler, this is Sparta.